From the moment that man first discovered that the fermented juice from fruits had a kick unequaled by other forms of refreshment, much time and effort has been spent in the production of such spirits. Throughout history, these fermented and eventually distilled spirits have played an important role in many areas of man's life. Serving man's pleasure, they have also served another role as a consistent basis of revenue production. While taxes have come and gone on other commodities or services, taxes on alcohol and tobacco have been a primary source of this nation's operational funds.
Earlier films and advertisements emphasize how attitudes towards alcohol change from decade to decade. From full prohibition in the 1920s to a culture in the 1950s where alcohol was looked on humorously, America has yet to make up its mind about the ethics of drinking. Over time, alcohol has been found to be a disinhibitor, a depressant, a cultural influence, as well as a toxic substance. These four qualities of alcohol can also lead to problematic levels of use, including abuse and addiction.
First time I got drunk, it was like, I liked the feeling, so I tried to drink more and more. So I thought if I drank more, I'd feel more and more better.
One of the desired effects of alcohol is its ability to lower inhibitions, and so drinkers are more likely to do things they normally wouldn't do.
We're gonna get drunk, of course, and we're gonna have a good time. And if it comes down to throwing couches in the middle of the street,
hey, we'll do it.
We'll do it.
Hey, we'll do it.
This disinhibition occurs because of alcohol's effect on the prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain that is in charge of decision-making and helps control desires and impulses generated by the parts of the brain that contain emotions.
And I could be more extroverted and outgoing with alcohol, whereas I always felt I was more shy and introverted, and alcohol allowed me to be loud, boisterous, opinionated, and I didn't have to be held accountable.
It affects the frontal lobes, the front part of your brain, which in human beings is the largest part of the brain. It's 30% of the human brain. That's the part of your brain involved with thoughtfulness, forethought, planning, concentration, organization, thinking before you say things, thinking before you do things.
The disinhibition is caused by alcohol's effect on two neurotransmitters, dopamine and GABA. Alcohol increases the release of dopamine, an excitatory brain chemical that affects the emotional center, resulting in the loss of impulse control. It also enhances the effects of GABA, an inhibitory neurotransmitter in the prefrontal cortex. This disrupts the ability to inhibit socially inappropriate impulses, making one more likely to say or do something stupid.
I'm sorry, but my experience, they get violent, they get derogatory. Women, they just drink and they have a good time.
We turn into so much fun.
We become like sort of the victim of the men drinking.
More beers.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the way it goes. I don't know.
Hey,
that's just my experience.
50% of all murders, 25% of all suicides, and 40% of all admissions to mental health hospitals occur while under the influence of alcohol, most likely because of the disinhibition, leading to a deadly release of anger and distorted thinking.
You get in fights, you wake up next morning, you don't know how you got home, and people tell you about things you did, and the night before when you were drunk, you can't remember it because you have blackouts. At least I know I did.
In trauma surgery, I would guess the majority of patients that we see have alcohol involved. In motor vehicle crashes, for example, 35% we know are legally drunk when they arrive in the emergency room. For domestic violence, it's much higher. For assaults, it's probably close to 80%.
20% of male alcoholics and 50% of female alcoholics have been sexually abused, often by predators who have lowered their inhibitions by drinking.
I've been raped several times, and in that, I think that I started to drink because it took that away.
This is for the kids of America.
Listen,
drink responsibly, please.
Now, people feel like taking a drink when they're excited, you know, and want to have fun at a football game or something, not to get down. They actually drink to get up. And if you look at most of the quote downers, there is an initial euphoric stimulative phase, which is then, of course, followed by a depressant phase.
Depending on the amount drunk and the makeup of the drinker, the apparent stimulation caused by alcohol starts to be overtaken by its depressant effects within an hour or two. The effects start first in the cerebellum, the part of the brain that controls movement, then in the brainstem, which regulates breathing, and finally in the cerebrum, the thinking brain, which controls speech, thought, and vision. It also has a major impact on one's mood.
It's just initially that I feel so, I feel good. And then after that, it's just I'm riding along on a physical stupor where I'm just inebriated and I just don't think about what I'm doing anymore.
The use of alcohol as a social lubricant and as a sedative likely started thousands of years ago. Since then, it has been integrated into the culture of most every society.
When I was coming up, everybody drank. I mean, couldn't wait till I was told one thing. I was about 12 years old. Only way you get hair on your chest is have a drink. The older people really didn't so much mind you drinking as long as you didn't act a fool behind it.
Germany and the United States are known as mixed drinking cultures. That is, alcohol is used with meals as well as between meals, often in a binge pattern, to get high or just to feel good.
When I was at a party a day before my birthday, and we was drinking Bacardi 151, and I didn't really like it, but I just drank it anyway because that's all that there was to drink there. And I got drunk, real drunk, and started acting stupid.
Many European countries, such as France and Italy, are known as wet drinking cultures, where most alcohol use is a family affair.
When we celebrate things in family, we have a meal with it. We're not drinking alcohol, just only alcohol. The wine and things like this come with a meal. Nobody is going to come out of that completely drunk. We may be probably happy because we drink a little bit, but we won't be drunk.
Even though humankind has had thousands of years to assimilate alcohol culturally, it can still cause physical problems because it is a protoplasmic poison. That is, it can kill cells on contact. The body tries to do all it can to rid itself of the toxin.
So by the end of the night, I had probably had about 15 beers, and I couldn't walk, and I remember throwing up on the way to his car, and I threw up in his car, and I don't remember that much. All I remember is throwing up.
The liver tries to protect the body from alcohol by metabolizing it at a faster rate. It does this by creating little metabolic factories which turn the alcohol into carbon dioxide and water. This encourages drinkers to consume more to get the same effects, a process called tolerance. In a number of cases, with long-term high-dose use, the liver is pushed to its limits.
And your liver expands and it contracts when you drink and you stop drinking. At some point when you stop, your liver's going to turn into a raisin. It's not going to expand anymore. That's when your liver's fried.
What I'm holding in my hand are two sections of liver from adults. This is from a healthy, normally functioning liver. This specimen is from a cirrhotic liver. What happens with continual exposure to alcohol and the buildup of the toxins is the hepatocytes die, and replacing them, you see this bumpy texture, is scar tissue that permeates throughout the liver. And eventually, you have a completely non-functioning organ.
Other organs are affected by long-term heavy use of alcohol, particularly the brain, heart, kidneys, and stomach.
After 30 years of drinking, I have developed mitral valve prolapse, a heart condition, fibromyalgia, the deterioration of my muscles. I have the early stages of osteoporosis. I have an ulcer in my esophagus. My memory is not good at this point of 48 days of sobriety. It's hard for me to make decisions, and I probably have lost 15 years of my natural life due to my alcoholism.
Because alcohol is toxic to cells, drinking during pregnancy can cause nerve damage or tissue damage to the fetus, consequences that last a lifetime.
Wally's birth mom was severe alcoholic. I mean, I never got to really meet her to sit down and talk to her. But I know that when she went into labor, she was in a bar and had fallen off a bar stool. And she was so intoxicated that they said that when Wally was born, he reeked of alcohol.
There are various patterns of alcohol use that range from abstinence and experimentation to abuse and addiction. It is usually the frequency and amount drunk that determines the severity of the problems.
Alcohol isn't necessarily an evil drug. That is, if people do not have contraindications to drinking. Contraindications are things like pregnancy, or taking medications that will be affected by alcohol, or somebody who's had alcohol dependence in the past, and I would look at them as still in recovery.
Other contraindications for use of alcohol, even in small amounts, would be pre-existing physical or mental health problems, digestive problems like stomach ulcers or hepatitis, someone with a high genetic and environmental susceptibility, or a worker in a dangerous profession.
Alcohol and work does not mix, and that's why I've got all my appendages because if I'm gonna drink, I won't work, and if I work, and then I don't drink.
The desired effects of alcohol are dose-dependent, as are the unwanted side effects. 1 or 2 drinks have a number of health benefits, such as lowering the risk of heart disease, but as the amount drunk increases, the severity of the effects increases. Episodic high-dose use is often referred to as binge drinking. In surveys, it is defined as having 5 or more drinks at one sitting for men and 4 or more for women. Both amounts, if drunk within 2 hours, would push the blood alcohol above the legal limit. Intoxication that impairs a drinker's ability to function versus legal intoxication that can get one arrested are often quite different.
A DUI would definitely curb my drinking. Like, if I got a Dewey right now, I would be hating life. You know, that's like a year you don't drive.
Episodes of intoxication, including those involving high-dose use, should not automatically be defined as alcoholism, particularly in high school and college. The real question is, are there any serious consequences, and will this pattern of drinking continue to progress?
We had like a couple gallons of Canadian Mist, and we mixed that with Squirt, and I drank for about a fifth of it, and just a whole bunch of Squirt, and just, I don't know, I was coughing, I was puking up blood, and I had blood coming out my nose, and it was all messed up. I passed out, and I didn't wake up for like a day and a half.
Putting a guy in the ground did nothing for our feeling of us being, you know, that indestructible, you know, kids that we were, you know, that age of, you know, God, we're young and strong, and, you know, there's nothing we can't do, or there's no consequences to this behavior. And even seeing it, going to the funeral, watching the hearse drive by, it was like, duh, didn't make the connection.
Extreme amounts of alcohol, when the blood alcohol level is 5 or more times the legal limit, can be fatal.
Alcohol poisoning is basically a young person's disease, and about the only setting where you hear about it is in one of these students who's pledging a fraternity. The reason that you don't hear about it occurring in older people is that, as with all drugs, you develop tolerance.
As alcohol is used to lower inhibitions, as it relaxes and depresses, as the culture encourages heavy drinking, as the toxic effects increase, and as the level of use advances, abuse and addiction become more likely.
Alcohol was always my primary drug of choice.
And I pretty much from the moment I started drinking, I drank as often as possible. The more I drank, the more I figured out how to continue that on. And of course, being drunk morning, noon, and night lands you in AA pretty quick.
In spite of all the tremendous, just exciting research that's going on with alcohol in terms of its brain scans, in terms of understanding how it affects the development of the brain, understanding how it impacts behavior so much, there's still a tremendous awareness gap or a lack of appreciation for the understanding of that knowledge. We have individuals, when we do the testing, that shows that 76% of those who test as having problems with alcohol, when we ask them about it, they claim they're not having problems with alcohol. Well, that needs to be addressed. That gap needs to be closed so people appreciate their problems much earlier, avail themselves to treatment much earlier, and therefore really decrease the devastating consequences that alcohol can have on their lives.